On this day, September 11, citizens of the United States commemorate the 23rd anniversary of 9/11. What is the 9/11? 9/11, the scariest and the most devastating tragic event in the history of the United States and probably in modern history. On the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 terrorists led by Mohammed Atta, in affiliation with Al-Qaeda, took control of 4 commercial aircraft, overpowering the passengers and the crew. 2 of the hijacked planes were deliberately crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. A 3rd plane slammed into the Pentagon, the nerve center of the U.S. military in Arlington, Virginia. Meanwhile, the 4th plane, United Airlines Flight 93, became a symbol of resistance as brave passengers fought back against their hijackers, ultimately leading to the plane's crash in the Pennsylvania field, thwarting the terrorists' intended targets in Washington, D.C. The attacks on the World Trade Center caused massive damage and fires, leading to the collapse of both the Twin Towers, with over 2,700 people killed. The Pentagon attack killed 1,025 people. In fact, in total, nearly 3,000 innocent people lost their lives in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The attacks also caused extensive damage to the World Trade Center site and surrounding areas, and had a significant impact on global politics, security measures, and international relations. The 9/11 attacks were planned and carried out by Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, who publicly claimed responsibility for the attacks. The attacks were intended to inflict maximum damage and harm on the United States and its people, and to promote Al-Qaeda's extremist ideology. 3 months later, on December 18, 2021, the U.S. Congress enacted a resolution which designated September 11 as a day of national observance. The day is officially known as a Patriot Day and is accompanied by a series of events, ceremonies, and tributes to honor the victims, survivors, and the first responders. First, a national moment of silence lasting for a minute is observed at 8:46 a.m. EDT, marking the moment when American Airlines Flight 11 struck the North Tower. Second, memorial services are held at the National September 11 Memorial and the Museum in New York City, the Pentagon Memorial in the Arlington, Virginia, and the Flight 93 National Memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Then, names of the victims are read aloud, and tributes are paid to the first responders, rescue workers, and the volunteers who aided in the aftermath. Also important are the symbolic flying of American flags at half-staff and the holding of flag-raising ceremonies at government buildings, schools, and public places. Evening candlelight vigils are also held in various locations, including the 9/11 memorials, to honor the victims and their families. In addition, many organizations and communities organize volunteer service projects, such as blood drives, charity runs, etc., etc. Parades, concerts, and patriotic events are also held across the country to celebrate the spirit of service. These events and tributes serve as a collective expression of national unity, respect, and remembrance for the lives lost and affected by the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Now, anyone can rightly say that Al-Qaeda's attacks were driven by religious motivations. Osama bin Laden, son of a wealthy Saudi family, established Al-Qaeda in the 1980s to bolster Arab forces battling Soviet occupation in Afghanistan. But after the Soviets withdrew in 1989, his sights turned menacingly towards the United States. Bin Laden's anger was ignited by the U.S. military presence in Saudi Arabia, close to Islam's holiest sites of Mecca and Medina, and by America's backing of Israel's perceived oppression of the Palestinians. This prompted him to, release a 1998 religious edict. This edict called on Muslims to kill Americans and their allies, civilians or military, wherever feasible. Meanwhile, the totality of bin Laden's Islamic philosophy was not discovered until his death in 2011, as Dr. Nelly Lahoud revealed in a 2021 essay. Bin Laden's ultimate concern was not being captured or killed, but rather the revelation of Al-Qaeda's inner workings and secrets.
It turns out that all the public statements that we've heard bin Laden deliver over the years were effectively co-authored with his 2 daughters, Maryam and Sumaya, as well as his 3rd wife, Siham. one of the first letters that I read when the CIA declassified those thousands of files that I noted earlier. The first letter was from his wife, Siham, writing to her daughter, who was in North Waziristan. And she tells her, I'm writing to you in haste because I'm busy preparing the public statements with your father. So clearly, Bin Laden's daughters and his wife did quite a lot of the heavy lifting.
In the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. launched a global war on terror under President Bush's administration, leading to a series of coordinated operations aimed at capturing or killing Osama bin Laden. Ultimately, on May 2, 2011, U.S. Special Operations Forces successfully targeted and neutralized bin Laden at his compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. Following his elimination, U.S. forces conducted a thorough search and seizure of bin Laden's documents and digital files. The seized papers totaling approximately 6,000 pages, contained a vast and intimate correspondence between Osama bin Laden and his inner circle, including his family members and closest associates. They included handwritten notes from 2002 in which bin Laden recounted his genesis of the 9/11 plot. These documents revealed that the idea to attack the American homeland was conceived in late October 2000, driven by bin Laden's belief that the Muslim world was suffering under the yoke of apostate regimes and American dominance. In her expert analysis, Nelly Lahoud, a professor of security studies at the U.S. Army War College, revealed that Osama bin Laden's terrorist attacks were not solely driven by religious zealotry, but also by geopolitical ambitions. Lahoud contends that the attacks marked the beginning of a far-reaching campaign of revolutionary violence aimed at dismantling the current international order and restoring the Ummah. What is the Ummah? A unified global Muslim community that once existed under a single political entity. Bin Laden's strategy relied on a false assumption that a single decisive strike would force the United States to abandon its military presence in the Muslim-dominated states. Bin Laden had predicted that the American public would rise up in protest, echoing the anti-war sentiment of the Vietnam era, and pressure their government to withdraw from the Muslim majority or dominated countries. But bin Laden was wrong. The mind frame that knowledge of Islamic history did not translate into knowledge of modern international relations was a fatal miscalculation on his part. In contrast to the Vietnam War, where protests and dissent weakened the U.S. efforts, the American public rallied behind President Bush's response to 9/11. When the U.S. and his allies invaded Afghanistan in October 2001, bin Laden found himself unprepared without a strategy to safeguard al-Qaeda's future, as the Taliban regime that had sheltered the terrorist group since 1996 began to crumble. The 9/11 attack was a costly win for al-Qaeda. The group fell apart after the Taliban was defeated, and many of its leaders were killed or captured. The rest hid in a remote area of Pakistan. Now, the 9/11 marked a turning point in history. It transformed the global response to terrorism and leaving a lasting legacy. Its impact continues to be felt, serving as a stark reminder of the need for collective actions and eternal vigilance in the face of terrorism.